So quite a common question we get when we start looking at extraction of aluminium is, why does aluminium need to be extracted by electrolysis? It can't be that reactive, it doesn't do anything, we wrap our food in it, it's pretty safe. No, actually, aluminium, if we have a look, is pretty close to magnesium in the reactivity series. It's not that far from sodium. It's above carbon, so we definitely couldn't use a blast furnace to extract it. Even though we know if we drop it into different chemicals further down, they don't seem to displace by it. So we've got copper all the way down here, which is a long way from aluminium, and I can drop my aluminium in some copper sulfate and nothing will happen. It's very, very, very unreactive. Nothing exciting going on at all. If aluminium is so much more reactive than copper, it should be displacing the copper from this solution. We know that from all the way back in year 8. So what's going on, basically? Well, when we think of aluminium metal, we are imagining that we have metal ions and our sea of delocalized electrons around it that we can then swap with our copper ones. But in reality, aluminium is a little bit unique. It has an oxide layer all the way around the outside. The aluminium is reactive enough to have reacted with the oxygen in the air and built this kind of protective coating, which is something things like magnesium do not have. Magnesium is just the ions with the sea of delocalized electrons. So when we drop magnesium into our copper sulfate, it will begin to fizz. Not quite in focus, and displace the copper. You can see the copper forming on the edges of the magnesium. So how do we know that aluminium is almost as reactive as this magnesium is? Well, we can strip that oxide layer off. If you can find something reactive enough to pull the oxygen off the outside of the aluminium, you can get the aluminium to start reacting a lot like the magnesium. So something that is reactive enough to pull that oxide layer off is something like sodium, higher up the reactivity series. So we're going to drop some salt into our solution, and the sodium will pull the oxide layer off, and then hopefully you will see that the aluminium will start to displace the copper from the copper sulfate. So here is our piece of aluminium from earlier, still doing nothing in our copper sulfate. The oxide layer is still there. I will add some sodium chloride, so we've got some sodium in there. Give it a little bit of a swirl, and then hopefully you should see the aluminium is starting to react with the copper sulfate. And you can see the beautiful copper forming that lovely red pink colour of the copper being displaced, because the sodium has pulled the oxygen off the outside layer. There's no oxide around the aluminium now, so the aluminium can now displace our copper sulfate. So aluminium is nearly as reactive as magnesium, and that's why we have to use electrolysis to extract it.